Hello everyone and good afternoon from Krakow. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about how to create eye-catching animations and snapshots using Imaris. So today's webinar is the last webinar of the first series called Getting Started with Imaris. Next week we are starting the second series, which will be focused on image analysis, so quantitative image analysis. You probably have already got the invitation to the next series, and you're welcome to sign up for the upcoming 5 webinars or the webinars of your choice. So one announcement for today's webinar, it's a few of us here online, so you're welcome to ask questions in the chat pod. We'll do our best to answer your questions during the presentation, and some of those will be addressed by me live in the end of this training. So let's get started. We have few important topics to cover today. So first of all, I will show you a few hints how to set up preferences to get a good snapshot. Then I have prepared 4 animations in Imaris, and I will show you the animations, and we'll recreate them in Imaris during this webinar. And I'll take this opportunity now to thank the researchers for sharing the data, so I don't go back to this later on. Alright, so let's start with Imaris. So let's open the data set, and here our today's topic is snapshot. So what's important for snapshot? So here the main thing is that you put your dataset in a position that you want to get a snapshot. So here, assuming, okay, I will turn off the ortho slicers. I just want my volume with objects. So I turn on the objects. Right, so, okay, so that's the data I want to create a high resolution snapshot from. So what should I remember? So there are a few things to consider. So first of all, volume. Make sure that your volume rendering quality is set on the maximum level. Adjust your display. So make sure that your display is adjusted to the point that you want it to be in a snapshot. Think if you want to see the scale bar. So if your scale bar is missing but you would like to see it, or otherwise, go to preferences, display, and here either show or hide the scale bar. Important parameter in preferences, it's found under display, is to enable off-screen rendering for snapshots and movies. So here this box should be ticked on. Okay. But then there are several important preferences for snapshots. So here is the snapshot button, but typically you don't just press it. First you need to set up a few things. So when I open this, again the preferences open and the snapshot part of the preferences opens. So I will describe you this window from bottom to the top. So first of all, image output directory. It's not complicated. Of course, you have few places where you can save your snapshot, so it's up to you where you want the export to be saved, or maybe you prefer the software to ask you every time where you want it saved. Then you select the image type, so the export type. So you have 3 options, and you can decide for yourself which format is the best for you. Each of them has its pros and cons, so it's up to you what you decide. Just one hint, so if you would like to export your image with a transparent background, There is TIFF and TIFF, which supports it pretty well, and PNG, which supports it also. So you have few options: either you copy to clipboard or not. Typically you want to save to file, and the option to open the saved file by default in the viewer. So I keep this option for now. I save to file, but I don't copy to clipboard. Then DPI, so this acronym stands for dots per inch, and this is a default and standard value for all images for the print. So it's 300 dots per inch. It doesn't change the resolution. It's the value you enter just for printing. So unless you have other directions, other directives, you don't change the DPI from 300. But how to modify your screenshot resolution and quality? So here we have the option to define the size of your snapshot. So either you do the snapshot from window. So here I have the window checked. So if I press OK and press a snapshot, I will have the exact same resolution that I have on the screen, but I also have an option to define a size of my snapshot. So here I go for a fixed size and have a look what happens with the surface preview area. So if I define select the fixed size, I can write the width and height. So here I would like to show you how to modify the resolution. So what happens when you type smaller or bigger number here. So let's say I want just a small little snapshot for a thumbnail. So I type 50 pixels wide and 25 high, press OK. Right, so my preview area changes in a way that my snapshot will look like. So it's important because now if I put my dataset like here, I know that it won't be cut from any side when I do the snapshot. So now press the snapshot, and you see that the image opened in Paint is very, very small. It's just the thumbnail. So when I zoom in, it's very pixelated. So here the resolution of the image was really, really low. It only looks good like this, right? So what to do to improve resolution? Just go higher with the size. So here I keep the aspect ratio. So I just add zeros and do the snapshot again. So we see now it's bigger, but when I zoom in, there are still some pixelated boundaries. So if I need, it depends on where I need this image. If it's just for like a Word document, it could be enough. But if it's for print or bigger print, it's far too small. So my next snapshot, I will make 1000 pixels by 500. You see the pixel rate is kept, so it doesn't change the size of the preview. Okay, so this is already bigger, and if you zoom in, it's far better. Obviously, you can smooth the edges even more by going farther up. So remember about this option when doing high resolution snapshots. So here you can see that the display doesn't take the full space, and Imaris reminds you about this with this sign. So if it says so and you want to go back to your normal window size, just go to Preferences, Window, and press OK. So you're back to your normal window size, and you can modify it accordingly. Okay, so that's most or all you need to know about Snapshot. So you see that Imaris renders the snapshot offline, so it's not only the screen capture. So the screen capture is when you do it from the window size, but you can improve the resolution of edges with off-screen rendering. Right, so now let's go to animations. Animations are pretty easy in Imaris, but you would need to remember a few tricks or a few things to make your animation look really, really nice. Right, so first of all, as I mentioned in the beginning, I prepared 4 animations for you today, and I will show you how to create them in Imaris. First one includes ortho slicers and rotation. Okay, so let's look at this animation from start to the end. So what happens first? So I have three ortho slicers in here close to the observer, and then ortho slicers are moving along, and the scene is rotating slightly. Okay, then it rotates a bit and ortho slices disappear, volume appears. And then you can see the smooth rotation in the vertical direction. So it rotates by 360 degrees. Okay, and that's the end of the movie. It goes back to its initial rotation position. Okay, so now let's go back to Imaris, and we will recreate this movie together. So first of all, what was visible on within the movie? So none of the objects were visible, so I will turn them off. For now, there were ortho slicers taking part and the volume. Right. So let's go back. Let's go to animation pane. So I turned the animation, and now I would like to give few minutes to explain you what is where in the animation pane. So here you can see the preview surface window where you can set your keyframes and see how the animation looks like. Then we have several buttons here, several groups of buttons. So here you can add a keyframe. So if you press add, the keyframe will be added here to the timeline. You can also modify the keyframes or delete them once they are added or jump between them. Then there is a section for rotation. So you can either choose a predefined rotation 360 any direction or 180 degrees any direction, or customize your rotation if you wish. So customization looks like this. So just define all the rotation parameters. Then there is a section about animation output. So you need to pick your output according to your needs. So you can see, first of all, that the aspect ratio of the outputs differ, and the resolution also differ for the output. So here it's important that you fit the output to your needs. If you want to play your video on one of the big screen or like 16:9 screens, you pick one of the 16:9 options, and typically HD, one of the HD formats to get the highest resolution. But it's up to you. It depends where do you need the video for. Obviously, the bigger the video, the more computer space it takes, and it's more heavy for PowerPoint presentations, etc. So it's really up to you, the choice. So here I will pick the HD with 16:9 aspect ratio, and here also you can see that Imaris changes the preview window. So if I pick 4:3, it already changes the aspect ratio. So you see, what you see on the screen will be also seen in the animation. So here I like this HD format for this elongated Drosophila. Right, so then there is a number of frames. So this number you can type. You can type as many number of frames as you wish, and this will be the final number of frames in your movie. So here there is an important factor. Movies in Imaris by default I rendered with the frame rate 24 frames per second. So it means that to play 24 frames, to play 24 frames, it takes 1 second. So if your movie, this means if your movie has 240 frames, it will last 10 seconds. Of course, the implication of it is the speed of transitions between keyframes you added. So later on, I will show you how to modify and how to adapt the number of keyframes to the number of frames to the number of keyframes you added. As a starting point, you can you can assume that the transition between your keyframes should last around 1 second or at least 1 second. So you just multiply the number of keyframes by 24, and that's your ballpark figure of the number of output frames to make the video play smoothly. But for the preview, I just keep the 100 frames for now. Okay, so here in the playback options, just make sure that all the options are ticked, so you don't have some not nice surprises that parts of your video are not recorded. Right, so now let's start with the animation. So first of all, what I need to do is to define the starting position. So I move my ortho slicers down like this. To see the ortho slicers only, I turn the volume off. So let's say the video starts in this position. So the first thing I need to do is to add first keyframe. So you see the keyframe was added here. But Imaris also adds the same keyframe to the end of the movie, to the end of the timeline. So it helps you if you want to play your video in a loop. So it just automatically goes back to the starting position. But it's up to you here. I don't want this loop effect. So I just delete the last keyframe. Okay. So let's start from the first one again. So what happens next? The ortho slicers are moving. So I move the ortho slicers to the slightly towards the middle, rotate a bit, and add a keyframe again. Okay, then Imaris adds the new frame on the right from the frame which is highlighted in white. So what happens next in the movie? So the ortho slicers move towards the end. This one goes towards the middle, and this is more here, and the scene is rotated like this. So I set up the frame and add a keyframe. And have a look at this slider, it will be added in the end. Right, so that's my new keyframe, and that's the previous one. That's my previous one, and that's the new. Right, so we can now preview this action. So this is how my video will look like. Okay, but there was another part with 360 rotation. So I go to the end, to my end frame, highlighted in white. Now what happens next? So the volume appears, ortho slicers disappear, and I add a frame. I can also slightly make sure that it's positioned correctly. Add another frame. And now I would like to pick one of the predefined rotations. So here I pick 360 vertical rotation. So now have a look what happens if I add the rotation. So Imaris automatically adds frames which are enough to render the rotation. So it's not one frame, it's 4 additional frames. So the frames were added here, so this is the last one. So now let's go through the frames. So this was the one I added first, this was my second frame, third one with the auto slicers in the end position. So here the volume appeared. Here I just adjusted the position, and now the frames of rotation. So these were the ones added automatically by Imaris. Right, so the rotation ends in the same position as it finished. Sorry. Okay, so now it's our timeline. I can also modify the time. So for example, this transition, this correction, slight correction of position doesn't have to take too long, so I can move the frame close to one another, and appearing of the volume can also happen faster. So I group these frames together and put this in the middle. Right, so now let's play the preview. So press the play button here. Okay, so it looks like the movie I've created. I just wanted to show you, to recreate this with you, so you can repeat it on your own data. Right, so now there is a question, how many frames should I pick? So as I mentioned, as a starting point, just calculate number of frames here by 24, so it's 1, 2. So it's 9 frame here, so I could do like it. I can do more or less 10, so it could be 240 frames, and this will ensure roughly. So this will mean that the video will last 10 seconds, so it should be enough for all the transitions. How to save the video now and record it off screen? So you just need to press the red ball button and select the output format. So you have a short choice of MP4, AVI, or the series of TIFF images, and save. I'm not going to save it now because off-screen rendering takes time depending on the output size you picked and the number of frames it has to render, because each frame has to be rendered individually. Alright, so we already managed to do the first movie, so now let's see what's next. So that was easy. Next, the objects come into play. So we can see that the objects appear during the rotation, then they disappear. I'm rotating, freely zooming in and zooming out, and the video is ended by the slight rotation around this object. So let's see it again slowly. So here I see again the smooth rotation around the vertical, so smooth vertical rotation, and all detected objects are slowly appearing in the covering the data. Then volume disappears. Then I'm rotating the scene slightly and zooming in. Then some of the objects disappear in groups, so the image is not as cluttered. I rotate again. Other objects disappear. and the rest of them disappear, and it's just this one which stays in the center. And then you can see the smooth 360 rotation around this object. Okay, so let's do it in Imaris now. So that's the same data, so I delete all keyframes, so I have clear timeline. There is no undo once you delete all keyframes, but Imaris always prompts you the question if you are really sure you want to delete them. So here I say yes, and now prepare the scene for my second movie. So in the second one, the auto slicers, they don't take part, so I need volume, I need all objects, and I need a clipping plane. So the appearance of the object is done with a clipping plane. So now I turn the clipping plane on and show you what exactly the clipping plane does. So here I want to mimic this action, so the slow appearance of objects covering the real data. Okay, so how do we do this? So I move the clipping plane here in the position that it covers all objects. So that's the starting point for my clipping plane. So it doesn't cover objects at all. So we see the clipping plane is on and all the objects are on as well. So the whole group is on. So now I can, here this option tells you to either show or hide the frame. I don't like this yellow frame too much, so I always hide it. And then how not to record this manipulator, just click somewhere. So once you put the clipping plane in a starting position, so once so the starting positions is that all the objects are covered, just select any other object on the list and the manipulator disappears. Okay, so adjust the position, and first thing which was happening was the vertical, so the one of the predefined vertical rotations around the axis. So I add the rotation, and you can see now Imaris added all the frames to define the rotation. So that's the first frame, and then all the rotation frames. So what should happen during this rotation? So in the last position, so once the rotation is finished, the clipping plane should already uncover all the objects. So I move the clipping plane in the maximum position, hide the frame. So now you see I have this last position of the rotation highlighted in white. I moved the clipping plane to the desired position in this point, and I just press modify. So then that's the middle of the rotation in this frame. So here the clipping plane should be somewhere in the middle. So I go to the clipping plane again, move it to the desired position. Okay, and modify. Oh, sorry. Click somewhere on the volume and modify. So here this is like, this is 1/4 and this is 3/4 of the rotation. So I just put the clipping plane accordingly in the correct position. So here it should be this on this moment it should be somewhere here. So I go to clipping plane again and move it here and modify. And the same story here. I just put the clipping plane here. Okay, and modify. So now let's preview what happened. I go back to the starting position. I just changed the number of frames for preview so it plays faster. So the egg chamber is rotating, objects are appearing slowly. That's what I wanted to achieve. Okay, let's not play it again. So go to the last frame of this section, and now what happened in the movie. So then the volume disappeared. So I turn the volume off and add a new clipping play. Sorry, a new keyframe. So here is the one which I added. Now I can slightly rotate my scene and add a keyframe. Remember not to do too big rotations or zooming, because then the transition must happen too fast and sometimes the effect will not be good. So just rotate or zoom by 2, 3, 4 steps. It depends on how fast you want to go, but remember not to do too big jumps. And after setting up every keyframe, just remember if you added a new keyframe. So now if I want to rotate and zoom, I need to remember to add a new keyframe so it's saved in my timeline. So what happened next? The objects were disappearing. So I turn off the yoke. I turn, no, it were these objects disappearing, add a new frame, rotate again a bit, add, and now there are some, okay. Okay, you can add one more keyframe and remove the north, so add one, zoom in, so now the ring canals and the yoke nuclei disappear. So there is one thing I would like to show you now. So I would like to set a center on this object, so my rotation goes around this. So I press this and selected the object, so it moved to the center. I add a new keyframe and I finish it with predefined 360 horizontal rotation. Right, so that should be it. So to speed it up, I just minimize the number of frames to speed up the preview. And let's see if the effect is what I wanted. Okay, objects are appearing, volume is disappearing. Yes. So it just plays quickly, but that's the effect I needed. So let's go from this part where I'm zooming into the object. So here you can tell that to render this movie 100 frames is not enough. Here to get the desired speed and the pace of transitions, it will be probably something close to 500 frames needed. So just adjust the number of frames to the number of keyframes you added and the desired speed of transition you need. Obviously, to save the movie, select the red button, pick the format and save. Okay, so that were the datasets where I wanted to show you a few tricks in 3D. These datasets did not have a time component, and now I will show you what you can do or how this timeline changes when you have time component. So here I also prepared 2 movies for you for a timeline with some nice effects. So first we're gonna show the time lapse with zooming. So here what you see on this video. So first of all, the time lapse, so the video is played along the movie, but somewhere towards the middle you see that the object is disappearing and it's uncovering the volume, and then you see that the camera is zooming in, so you see the T killer cell in its full grace in the middle of the screen, and then it's slowly zooming out towards the end. Okay, so how to recreate this effect in Imaris? So here we need to change the dataset because this one is just one time point. And open the other one. You can see that the objects are detected already. If you have questions about the segmentations or how did we define the objects, my colleague Lindsay will show everything to you next week. So if you're interested in the objects creation, please make sure that you sign up for the next webinar from our homeschool series. So you have 2 objects here, so I will also show you the volume behind. So what happened in the movie? We had, I think this cell was different texture, so I just changed the texture to one of the solid textures, and this was transparent. But I only need one channel, so I turn off green and red, and here the time lapse looks like this. So one cell is eating the other. So now it's a time lapse. So how to record the time lapse? So if you set your the position, so if you set your movie, if you position your data set in the middle, set the frame to the first one, and add a first keyframe, have a look what happens. So Imaris already adds the first keyframe as a first frame and the last one as a last frame from the time series. So now when I play the preview of the movie, it just plays me the movie without any rotations and movements. So if you don't want to rotate your time-lapse, or if you don't want to modify it, you can simply record it at this point. But I just wanted to show you a few modifications you can do. Well, with the time-lapse, you have to make sure you don't do too many rotations, movements, or modifications, because otherwise you're it's too much if you make too much movement in the time lapse, you don't recognize which movement is internal, which is added. So it's sometimes it's even better to keep it as it is, but there are occasions that you want to zoom into the specific place or something. So I just want to show you how to do it. So the timeline is already here, and if I go for it, you can see that I'm going through my timeline. So what happened in my movie? So I was somewhere here. I think I zoomed in a bit, so I just zoom in and add a new frame. Then here I can zoom in as well, and here I think this surface disappeared. So I turn the surface off and just keep the volume and add the frame. Here we can add one slight rotation, add a keyframe, and towards the end it was going back to its normal shape. So we can see that when I play the preview, now I animate both movements. So one is the initial timeline and then some actions which I introduced on the scene. So zooming in, rotation, and disappearing of the surface. Right, here again a number of frames should be adjusted to the number of keyframes added and the desired speed you want to get your movie in the end. So to remind you, 120 frames will be 5 seconds in reality. Right, so what's the last movie? Let's have a look. So the last movie also gets this dataset. And in the last one, I wanted to show you how to play a time-lapse, which includes a predefined rotation. Okay, so here let's go back to the beginning. So you have the initial time point and you see that the time-lapse is played from the start, but also cells are rotating around its axis, so they finish here. Okay, so how to do this? So I delete all the frames from the previous movie, go back to the starting point, and now there will be, okay, so then I turn the cursor cell. Here I want to I will turn off the volume, but I will also change the color and the transparency of the cursor cell, so it looks like this. So let's have a look at my, okay, so here in this example it's important to keep them in the field of view because they are changing its orientation pretty significantly. Okay, let's do it like this. So now I will do it different way than previously. I'll start with adding a rotation. So here I add a 380 horizontal rotation, and I add the rotation in the right. So you see Imaris has already added 3 frames, which are enough to define the 180 degrees rotation. But all the frames are in the same time point. So to also, so once I do the preview, there is a rotation, but a rotation of just a static image, so just first frame. So you see that the frame here is all the time on the first position. So what to do to also animate the movement? So first position, first frame is okay. Then here in the middle frame, just go to some of the frames in the middle. So this movie has 76 frames. So I go to 38 frame here, and this is the middle frame. Here you can see that I have this middle keyframe highlighted, and I modified it to the frame 38, and now I can press modify, so Imaris saves it in the timeline. So you can see that the timeline line has been added already, but I still need to modify the last frame. So in the last one, I go to the frame 76 and press modify. So here you see that the timeline has been added. So my time series has been added here. And I go now to the first frame and play preview. And now you can see it's not only the rotation, but also the movement of objects animated now. Right, so that's it. You can as well save your movie pressing here. Okay, so I showed you how to create 4 movies with different effects. Of course, you can combine the effects, so you can combine objects appearing in the time lapse or combine different stories. But important for me was for you to understand, so that you understand how to create the effects and we don't get lost in the number of keyframes added. Also, one hint for creating of your movies: sometimes it's better to avoid too many frames or too long movies with too many actions, because then it's really hard to remember what was going on where and hard to modify the actions. Then some of the transitions go too fast, so sometimes it's better to create 2 movies then and play them one after another than to create the too long movie of your dataset. Okay, that's it from my side today, and I hope many of your questions have already been answered in the chat pod. I hope you heard me okay this time, and now I'm happy to take some of your questions live. So just you can ask me about one of the datasets we have here, or the other one, or you might have another questions how to do certain thing in Imaris. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. So again, this is Meredith. I am going to ask Anna some of the questions that have come into the question box as we've been listening. Okay, let me switch over. So Orally asks, what are the units for the width and the height for the snapshot? So can you go over that a little bit more? There were a couple of other questions as well for that one.
Sure. Okay, I hope you all hear me okay. So let's go back to the snapshot preferences. So here, if you define the snapshot size, you define it in pixels. So these are pixels. You define the pixel size. Okay, the next question, Meredith.
Yep, sorry.
Thank you.
I had muted myself. Anaket asked, is it advisable to select all the playback options while creating the animations?
Yes, let's go to animation. So let's, sorry. Yes, so the question is about the, sorry, the playback options here. So in the majority of the movies, so typically when you record the movies, yes, it's better always to check if you have all the options checked in. Otherwise, it might be really disturbing if you animate your clipping plane moving and then it doesn't appear on your video. But there are some options where you do some, when you want to do some modification or add some something during the movie, but you don't want it to be visible in the final movie, so then just uncheck this option. But in the majority of the movies, typically just make sure that you have everything on so we don't get bad surprises.
Yep, that's one of those things that can be hard to track down when you accidentally uncheck something. So yeah. Okay, next question is from Jared, and he's asking, what is the proper way to use that modify button in the animations? So can you talk a little bit more about that too?
Sure. Okay, so there are several ways. So there are a few ways to use. So during my webinar, I showed you a few ways to for modify button. I didn't show you the simplest one. So once I add, for example, 2 frames, and here I realized, oh, I wanted to have my volume included, or I want to have different color of this surface. I just go to the surface tab, change its color, and now I press modify. So that's an example of just applying some simple. So here I have to modify it again to the same color. So this is just correcting for your mistake. Okay, I have picked not the same color, but it doesn't matter here. So we might just correct for your minor mistakes. But I also showed you several ways of using the modify button to actually make your actions happen. So to add the rotation first and then add the clipping plane. So then it's also recommended to use the modify button. It's a nice way to animate some actions in Imaris animation.
Cool. Thanks. Yes, I find myself using modify when I make a mistake, or sometimes if someone wants to just make an adjustment, change something after the fact. Okay, and then the last question I've got for you from the list is from Julia, and she is asking what exactly is the clipping plane doing when it's uncovering the objects? I think sort of, is it getting rid of the data, or so yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Sure. So the clipping plane, clipping plane is just covering, so hiding or unhiding objects or data which are below on the list. So it's not modifying your data, it's not removing it, it's just hiding all objects which are below your plane. Okay, so that's, I hope it was understandable.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Yes, the
Okay.
original data is there. It's just hiding it from us, essentially, in the visualization only. Okay, we have gotten a few more questions coming in, but I think we are going to leave it at that right now. For now, what we will do, as we have been doing, is get those questions out to our teams, and they will be following up with you if you have some. If you've asked. And yeah, so thank you again for attending. Anna, thank you for giving a great webinar. You've gotten a lot of good feedback. Thanks. We have great customers asking good questions, and we are really enjoying doing these webinars for you all. If you haven't signed up for the next set that Anna was talking about, we're moving into analysis and using the different models. I'm really excited for that. You are all going to get a reminder email for that. So since you've registered for this webinar and are attending it, you're going to get that information from us. So we'll make sure that you're going to be able to sign up for that. You'll also get an email from me soon as well. And so you can ask me that question and I'll get back to you with a link if you need it. So yeah, I think we're probably all set. Thanks again for everyone for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend. Thanks again, Anna.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.